For many years, Maria had been stealthily navigating the margins of Taylor Swift's universe. She did not participate in the interviews, the roaring crowds, or the stage lights. In Taylor's absence, she was the one who took responsibility for ensuring that the house remained in good condition. She was the one who folded freshly laundered sheets, prepared coffee before the sun rose, and moved around the house without anyone noticing her presence. She never went out of her way to be recognized for her accomplishments, performing her duties to the best of her ability and making life easier for someone she admired from afar were the things that gave her the most pride. The days when her life was filled with adversity were now a thing of the past. Although Taylor's job in her own home provided her with a sense of stability that she had never experienced before, it was still far from glamorous. Maria lived her life in a simple apartment that was located outside of the city while Taylor flew across oceans and lived under stadium lights. Maria would spend time laughing with her neighbors, making her own meals, and sending a portion of her paycheck back to her family. She was frugal with her money and saved it for the little pleasures that most people would not even notice, and she wore plain clothing while carrying the same handbag for years. Nevertheless, Maria was exceptional, not because of the situation she found herself in. Her heart was the source of the problem. She had dedicated the majority of her adult life to assisting others by donating money, purchasing textbooks for her younger brother's education, assisting her parents in making repairs to their old house, and prioritizing the needs of everyone else over her own. She maintained a quiet and graceful demeanor even when it was necessary for her to put her own aspirations on hold. Maria did not find herself in a fairy tale when she first encountered Daniel. Their love gradually developed as a result of lengthy conversations, shared responsibilities, and the comfort that comes from two people who understand what it means to struggle. Daniel was not someone who was wealthy. As a mechanic, he was required to work shifts that were quite long. However, there was a warmth to his personality, and he possessed a knack for making Maria feel as though they were both seen together. They did not fantasize about living in luxury. The creation of a life that was full of love and honesty was their vision for the future. Therefore, when the day that Maria and her partner would be married finally drew near, she made preparations for it in the same manner that she had lived her entire life, which was with humility, gratitude, and concern for others. There would be no chandeliers, no designer dresses, and no halls that shimmered. Instead, there would be a small community venue, decorated with the help of neighbors and cousins, and it would be filled with people who genuinely adored them. That was all that Maria needed. Nevertheless, one evening during a quiet moment, she found herself writing an invitation for someone she never anticipated seeing there, despite the fact that she had never imagined that she would ever do such a thing. She took great care in addressing the matter, and her hands trembled a little bit as she did so. She did not do it out of a sense of obligation, nor was it done in the hopes of creating a spectacle. It was done out of the straightforward desire to include an individual who had been an unspoken component of her journey. She was completely aware of the fact that Taylor Swift's life was overly busy, overly demanding, and too far removed from her own life. Despite this knowledge, she sealed the envelope and sent it. Maria did not want to appear ridiculous, so she never told Daniel or any members of her family about it. She did not want anyone to think that she actually believed that a superstar would show up at her wedding, which was being held in an unpretentious wedding hall. In Maria's opinion, the mere fact that she had sent out the invitation was sufficient. She was expressing her gratitude for the stability, respect, and quiet encouragement that she had discovered while working at Taylor's house through this particular method. She never anticipated that anything else would happen. Taylor Swift had already opened that invitation and paused somewhere a long distance away from her small apartment, which was something that she was unaware of at the time. The morning of Maria's wedding arrived quietly, without grandeur, but with a kind of beauty that cannot be purchased. The sunlight gently made its way through the windows of her small apartment, casting a golden glow across the simple veil that was draped over the back of a chair. Maria awoke at an early hour, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The room was abuzz with conversation as her sisters and cousins pinned her hair and made adjustments to the delicate lace that adorned her dress. It did not come from a designer. It did not cost a lot of money. Maria, on the other hand, barely recognized herself when she looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was unable to see the housemaid, who had devoted years of her life to keeping other people's homes tidy. She observed a bride who was quivering with anticipation and glowing with happiness as she prepared to embark on a new chapter in her life. The ceremony took place in a small community hall, which was located close to the place where she had been raised. Laughing and carrying platters of food, as well as vases of flowers, friends and family made their way to the event. The sound of their laughter echoed off the plain white walls. Every single decoration had been made by hand. Small details and candles, along with paper garlands, were all woven together by the people who loved her. Although it was nowhere near as lavish as a celebrity wedding, it had a feeling of being full of something more valuable. Daniel was standing at the altar and he was nervously tugging at his tie. He was constantly looking toward the door as if he were counting down the seconds until Maria arrived. His friends were making fun of him and his mother was wiping the tears from her eyes. The room became completely silent when she eventually did. Neither was she adorned with jewels, nor was she surrounded by cameras. She was nothing more than Maria, smiling through her tears as she stretched out her hand to touch the man she loved, her hands shaking as she did so. They each made their vows to one another. With trembling fingers, the rings were slid onto their respective fingers. When they kissed each other, they made their promises official, and the room erupted with applause. For a brief moment, Maria believed that her heart could not possibly contain any more happiness than it already did. According to her, this was the most important moment in the story of her life, a moment that would forever remain hers and that nobody could ever take away from her. However, in the quiet corner of her mind, she recalled the invitation that she had sent out weeks before. She had not yet made any mention of it to anyone else. She was not interested in inviting ridicule or raised eyebrows. Taylor Swift's presence at her own wedding? There is no way that could happen. Nevertheless, as the festivities went on and people clapped their hands while the music played quietly, Maria found herself looking at the doors out of the corner of her eye. Initially, she felt that she should be punished for even considering the possibility. However, something changed after that. Beginning in the back rows of the room, a sense of quiet began to spread. Conversations gradually came to an end. The laughter ceased and a sense of bewilderment spread through the attendees. Maria was confused and did not understand, so she frowned. Her cousin's hand covered her mouth, but her eyes were fixed on where her sister was pointing. Her widened eyes. In the middle of her uncle's sentence, he suddenly stopped moving. And then, during that delicate moment of silence, the doors of the hall began to swing open. Every single person held their breath for a moment, and not one of them was brave enough to inhale. After that, Taylor Swift appeared in the doorway, framed by the doorway's edges. There was no camera crew or group of people accompanying her. She did not have any glitter on her clothing, nor was she enveloped in the grandeur of her own celebrity. She was nothing more than Taylor. Her smile was gentle yet unwavering, and her dress was simple with her hair hanging loose. The room was at a loss for words. For a brief period of time, gasps of surprise rippled through the crowd. The visitors held their hands over their mouths. There were quite a few people who whispered her name in disbelief. There were other people who remained motionless, unable to speak because they were too shocked. Daniel's eyes grew larger in size. However, the person who was completely unable to move was Maria. Her heart was pounding as if the world had become unbalanced, and she stood there with her lips parted, unable to move from her position on the floor. With silent steps, Taylor made her way into the hall. Maria found herself the object of her unwavering attention. She did not greet her with a polite handshake or a wave from a distance when she finally got to her. She extended her arms out in front of her. Maria succumbed to the embrace, her body trembling and tears flowed down her face. The woman was being embraced by someone she had looked up to for many years, the person who she had assumed would never venture into her small, unremarkable life. The woman was holding her as if she were a member of her own family. In a quiet voice, Taylor whispered, "It was you who invited me," as her voice broke the silence. "And I couldn't let you begin this new chapter without knowing how much you mean to me." The room burst into applause. There were guests who made no attempt to hide their tears, and there were others who shook their heads in disbelief, as if they were still struggling to accept that what they were witnessing was real. Maria did her best to say something, but she was unable to because her voice would not cooperate. She could only hold on more tightly than she already was. Taylor did not show up without anything in her hands. A guitar was carried to the front of the room after a member of the staff, who was waiting discreetly in the back, received a nod of acknowledgement. She delicately picked it up, sat down on a chair, and allowed her fingers to gently glide over the strings of the instrument. Her voice resounded in the hallway as if it was intended for only Maria and Daniel to hear, and the first chord, which was delicate and quavering, echoed throughout the hall. As the music enveloped the guests, they leaned in closer, forgetting about everything else. A hush fell over the room as they became completely absorbed in the music. During those brief moments in time, the humble hall transformed into an object of reverence. As the song enveloped them, Maria openly wept while holding Daniel's hand tightly in her own. Never before had she felt so loved, so valued, or so seen. And as the last note was drawn out and gradually faded away into nothingness, there was an initial hesitation on the part of the audience to applaud. Breaking the moment was out of the question because it was too sacred and too fragile. The room burst into a cacophony of applause, cries, and laughter. No more than a heartbeat later, Taylor set the guitar down and went back to Maria's side. "This event is something that I simply could not pass up," she said, her voice filled with emotion as she clenched her hands tightly together. "Not after you have provided so much affection and care. It feels wonderful to be here with you right now." Once again, Maria broke down and fell into her own arms, crying into Taylor's shoulder. The wedding continued, and happiness was felt throughout the remainder of the evening. However, people were aware that they had witnessed something that was out of the ordinary. The arrival of Taylor Swift was not the sole factor to consider. It was about the manner in which she had made the decision to leave her reality in order to pay tribute to someone who believed that she was not even there. Even years later, people would continue to talk about it. On the night that a superstar decided to prioritize love over distance and humility over grandeur, in the evening that Taylor Swift made an unexpected appearance at her maid's wedding, leaving each and every person who was in the room with tears in their eyes.